want to welcome everybody to the August Lunch and Learn series today and make an announcement that next week we will next month we will have Dr. Legere presenting about differential diagnosis of dementia. But this week, we're very pleased to introduce Dr. Alejandra Morlett. She is a postdoctoral scholar in the Department of Neurosciences and has been very successful in doing a variety of different projects, in particular working with Dr. Hector Gonzalez, and she's a RICMAR scholar, and she also has been doing her own project looking at attitudes of Latinos towards different research procedures, and in particular autopsy, which is of very great interest to our ADRC because we do ask that participants in our longitudinal cohort agree to that procedure, although we do relax that criteria for Latinos because we have found some differences. So we're really excited to have you here today speaking about this topic and appreciate you taking the time to be with us. So welcome.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to be presenting the results of my pilot study. I'm not sure how many of you remember and if you guys were here, but I presented this pilot idea a little bit over a year ago when I was developing the questions for the interview. And I got the opportunity to meet some of you and discuss one-on-one ideas. And I'm really happy just to be back here and presenting this to you all. So let's begin. There you go. All right, well, the purpose of the study that I'll be sharing with you today was to understand the perceptions and attitudes that Latinos have towards participating in Alzheimer's disease research, especially as it relates to brain donation. First of all, why should we care about Latinos? Well, first, as we know, Latinos comprise the largest ethnic racial minority in the US. And as you can see from this figure, by the year 2060, they are expected to encompass nearly 1/3 of the total population. And this rise of Latinos across the US makes it imperative for us to address certain health gaps in this population. And Latinos, as we know, they're living longer, but they're also living with more diseases. And one of the leading causes of illness and death among Latinos, as you can see from this list here, is Alzheimer's disease. And currently, Alzheimer's is the 8th leading cause of death among Latinos. And this number of Latinos in the US living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias is both currently substantial and projected to grow significantly. And this little infographic that you can see here, does a really good job at summarizing some of those facts. And sadly, if nothing is done by the year 2060, the number of Latinos living with Alzheimer's disease are projected to increase to 3.5 million. And also Latinos are 1.5 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's than non-Hispanic whites. And we don't know much about why this is. And unfortunately, despite this higher risk that exists in Latinos living with dementia, as you can see from this, despite this risk, they're less likely than white patients to receive timely diagnosis. They're also more likely to report experiencing racial discrimination along their patient and caregiver journeys. And as well, they're less likely to be enrolled in cutting-edge Alzheimer's disease research, which brings me to, there you go, to this very important part. Now, despite this growing impact of this disease in the Latino community, only a small percentage of Latinos participate in Alzheimer's disease research. And current data across approximately 30 National Institutes of Aging funded ADRCs across the United States, it shows that only 3.7% of neuropathology data, that contains autopsy, comes from Latinos, compared to 91% that comes from white research participants. And at the moment, brain autopsy is still the gold standard for diagnosis of AD, but we don't have enough Latinos donating their brain for research. So this limits our understanding on the disease specific to this population. So this reflects the urgent need for current and future research that includes Latinos, especially research that requires brain donation. And this brings me to the study that I conducted. And the name of the study was called Pasión, or Passion, and it stands for Perceptions and Attitudes of Aging-Related Research in Older Latinos. And again, the purpose of this was to examine what Latinos think of brain donation for Alzheimer's disease research, with the intention to help us understand more how to best approach Latinos and educate them about this topic in the future. Out of 50 participants that were interested in participating in our study, the majority, as you can see from this little figure, heard about the study from someone that had already done the study, so word of mouth. And out of those 50, some were not eligible, some refused, or we could not locate them. So at the end, we screened and enrolled 40 participants, and all of those 40 completed the phone interview, which I'll discuss in a second. Also, before I continue, I want to share some demographics from the study. The mean age was 50 years of age, so we had a relatively young older population. The majority were women, and the mean total years of education was 13. Also, the majority have been born in Mexico. And I did not add this here, but the majority of our participants were from San Diego, from California. But we had a nice little group that called from Oregon, and the person that invited them heard it from someone in San Diego that did the study and communicated. So the word of mouth really helped in this study specifically. Okay. Now, this study consisted of one phone call with me, which took about 1 hour and a half to complete, depending on how much participants would talk. And I'm not sure if you have experience talking with Latinos, but we like to talk quite a bit. So some of my interviews went pretty long. But yeah, the study was completed in between 1 and 1.5 hours. And at the end of the study, participants were compensated with $40 for their compensation. And to your right is an example of the flyer that we use in social media. So as you can see, we ask if they identify as Latino, if they were 50 or older, and they had that information there where they could contact us, and my research assistant, Leslie Guareña, she would call them back and screen them. And then they would set an appointment for me and the participant to do this phone interview. Now, some of the topics that were discussed during this phone interview were related to Alzheimer's disease. We talk about lumbar puncture, CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, and brain donation. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'll be focusing on the brain donation part of my interview with the participants. But I still find it fascinating, some of the things that we learned from the lumbar puncture and just Alzheimer's disease in general, that I would love at some point to analyze that data. But at the moment, just brain donation. The semi-structured interview included open-ended questions, but we had the opportunity to go deeper into the answers, which is the beauty of qualitative work. We were not limited by the set of questions that we had planned. And the questions were as follows, as you can see in this orange box. Some of the questions were, have you ever heard of someone donating their brain for research? Will you be willing to donate your brain for Alzheimer's disease research? If yes, why? If no, why not? Even if you were willing, what are some reasons that you might or might not end up donating your brain to research? And lastly, what are the things you think researchers should consider before approaching people in the Latino community to talk about the possibility of donating their brain for research. These were some of the questions that we asked. And all participants, I forgot to mention this earlier, but they verbally consented to the study and to having their interview or the phone call being recorded. And our audio was sent to a transcription service company called Go Transcript, meaning that the audio was converted to text in order for us to later go and analyze the participant responses. All right, so we use a qualitative software called Atlas, which was suggested by the qualitative expert that we hired to guide me through this process, because I'm not a qualitative expert, but I've done some qualitative work in the past, which was helpful for me when doing this study specifically. And I want to take the time to walk you briefly about how we came to analyze our text. Myself and 3 other research assistants read all the 40 transcripts to get an idea of the information that we had. We developed a dictionary with initial codes or concepts. So basically words that we were attaching to specific phrases or even paragraphs. And we gave these codes a definition based on the text, and we also gave them an example so that later on we could go back to this dictionary and be able to understand which code goes where when we're reading other transcripts. And we use a couple of transcripts. I believe we used 4 as a practice run. And after we didn't see any more codes, any new codes emerge from what we were reading, we moved on and used that dictionary, that code dictionary, exclusively for the rest of the transcripts. And we weren't creating any new code, so we stuck to what we had. And these codes eventually turned into categories. We started to see patterns and relationships between codes, which eventually came to be our themes that I'll be discussing in a bit. And the research assistants and I would meet every week to discuss our progress with our coding the transcripts. And also we discuss any doubts or questions that we had with specific transcripts, because sometimes it was a little bit hard to interpret which code maybe was better to use with specific examples. So we would meet regularly to discuss any discrepancies. At the end, we switch the transcripts and we all double check each other's work to make sure that we also agreed with the codes that they were doing. So we did that a couple of times with the different transcripts. Also, the software that we use, Atlas, it allowed us to visually see patterns that otherwise would have been difficult to observe by just looking at the text. And it also allowed us to see the frequency of the codes, how often the codes that we were using were seen. And these are just some screenshots that I took of the software with some examples of how we used it. And I'll be happy to meet with anyone if you guys wanna see it and see examples and all of that, because it is really really interesting. Also, from our qualitative analysis, it revealed 3 themes. The first one being lack of knowledge and misconceptions about brain donation. The second theme was altruistic motivation for brain donation. And the third and final theme was beliefs and traditions that influence willingness for brain donation. And although this 4th one here at the bottom is not a theme per se, but our participants did give us recommendations that could potentially help us increase their willingness to participate in brain donation. So now to go a little bit more in detail about each of these themes. The first one, as I said, was lack of knowledge and misconceptions. And this was one of the themes with the highest frequency during our analysis, meaning that we saw it on almost every single transcript and multiple times being brought up. And again, many of the participants were unfamiliar with the concept of brain donation, lack of knowledge being a major barrier For our participants, this absence of information extends to Latinos' misconceptions and inaccurate beliefs about brain donation and its process. Some participants did not know about autopsies. They did know about autopsies and research studies, but them envisioning themselves as brain donors was a more difficult task. And those that did have limited knowledge had the belief that because they are listed as organ donors on their license, that already included the brain, when in reality, this is a separate process. And I want to share with you two quotes from this specific theme. The first one, it was a participant. He was a male, age 51, and he said, I really don't know. You see, when you get your driver's license and they tell you if you want to be a donor or not, if you agree to be a donor, you are donating your entire body to science. First, if there is someone who needs a part of your body, an organ or something like that, they will remove it from you. You already signed. And I imagine that the brain is part of the organs that can be removed. And this second participant was a female, age 60. She said, until now that you are telling me, I did not know about brain donation. I know researchers study the brain and everything, but I didn't know about donating. This is what should be discussed. What are donations for? We all know about donating the blood, So in a way, making brain donation normal. Kind of when we hear about donation of blood, I believe this participant was trying to say, let's normalize brain donation anyway. And then the second theme that we found was altruistic motivations. After discussing with the participants the benefits and value of brain donation, a majority of Latinos express having a better understanding and more positive attitudes towards the idea of brain donation, especially coming from participants that had more altruistic and empathetic beliefs. And some of our participants express a higher willingness to donate, knowing it could help researchers find a cure for Alzheimer's disease, from which their own from their own future generations could benefit from. And these altruistic feelings towards others were important to participants' motivations in considering brain donation. These feelings of altruism are very important because, similar to other studies with ethnic minorities, altruism serves as a motivator to increase a person's willingness to brain donation. And this belief that donating their brain could help scientists find a cure, and they believe that brain donation would benefit their community and possibly their own family and future generations, provides a powerful motivation to become a potential brain donor. In observation, altruism or good intentions toward brain donation is one thing, but taking it into action is something different, and that's the challenge that should be considered for future projects. And but yeah, according to the literature, willingness is still one of the best measures for intention, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. And two of the quotes that I want to share with you from this theme are these ones from a male, age 69. He said, I think that it is a responsibility of every human being to put their brain in the hands of scientists of science. I think it is our responsibility to donate, since it is a characteristic that human beings should have, to practice empathy. And a second participant, a female, age 57, she said, well, I've already lived my life, but maybe I can make a difference in the future. It's about leaving a legacy, or for a better generation. It's about taking the approach that this is for your future, your kids, your grandkids, and their kids, for them to be able to have the possibility of surviving something like this, talking about dementia. Then she continued, I don't know how quick the research will be. I know it takes years, but I think it would definitely help future generations. And finally, the third theme that we found was beliefs and traditions. And cultural and religious beliefs were important to participants in considering brain donation. However, I do want to mention that interestingly here for my pilot specifically, our participants share that religion, culture, or traditions were seen as barriers to brain donation, but not specifically to them. They were talking more about other Latinos, like their parents or older Latinos, much more older Latinos, which again can be seen as a reflection of the younger population that I interview. Participants explained that other Latinos may not want to donate their brain for research due to beliefs about death and what is considered body integrity after death, including comments about being punished by God or following God's word or continuing their parents' tradition to what is considered a proper burial. And here are some examples of the quotes that I got from this theme. And they were pretty long because Latinos like to talk a lot, and it was a little bit hard for me to condense them. But the first one comes from a participant, male at age 60, and he said, in general, Latinos come from very little school. Our culture is very close. When you are a family person and all that, you just keep what you learn from your family. Even some of us who finish school, we have some very ingrained beliefs that are difficult to control. But most Latinos, depending on where they come from, it is more difficult for us to want to donate because our parents did not teach us that from a young age. Although it can help someone else, we don't see it. It doesn't transcend our thought that donating can really be helpful. It has a lot to do with our religion, our way of thinking about it, what is really going to happen in the future. This is what happens to us Latinos. We don't think that we can really do something later. And then there was this other female, age 63, participant that said, culture is very important because we can be very educated and we can read many books, but beliefs are stronger than anything. The belief, which is our culture, we think that if we donate something from the body, we see ourselves as incomplete or something mystical happens. I've heard of people say, oh no, I wouldn't do it because God would punish me. And lastly, this other quote says from a female age 50, to be honest, many people, we sometimes are very ignorant. There are things ingrained in us from a very young age that one dies and has to be buried. I think that it is more difficult for Latinos to donate a part of their body because, as my mother says, why do it? God wants the body in one piece. How can one hand be here and another over there? No. Making older people understand it is impossible. Our culture makes it very difficult for us to donate a part of our body. So these were some quotes from it. And it was really nice at the end, even though it was a question that I asked participants, what would they recommend for us as researchers to do before approaching them? The recommendations that were given to me, I kind of divided them into three categories. One being what the message is, how they see this message, and who it comes from. And like starting from the bottom up, learning the importance and impact that they could have for future generations by donating was a message that many participants responded positively. And participants expressed the importance of being introduced to this topic of brain donation by someone they trust and could have a conversation with about the prospect of donating. For example, coming from their doctor, their religious leader, or their adult children. Also, participants expressed more willingness to learn about brain donation if they heard about the topic during what seemed a convenient time to them. For example, while waiting to see their medical providers, maybe having a little flyer or watching it from the television as an informational flyer on TV or commercials. Some people even say that during their drive to work, or participants were especially interested in practical message, how these messages would be tailored to them. Some suggesting shorter messages in length. Some even mention if it's a video, it has to be like 30 seconds. They said that they have to be easy and more digestible, use more digestible words, avoiding jargon or medical terms. And so what I got from all of this really is that we have to really invest in our community if we want them to be informed about brain donation or Alzheimer's disease in general, as we've been doing. But as I learned, brain donation, this topic is they don't know about it. So we just need to come up with the right information, the best way of doing it, and then giving them to our community or those that are already part of our research studies. I have the belief that we have to partner with our local agencies, maybe news stations, radio stations, and really get the word out. And there were some quotes here that I wanted to share with you. For example, for practical messages, one participant, male, age 61, he said, "First step, I think it is to prepare something that is very easy to digest, like a flyer. If you put many words to that flyer explaining what you're going to do, people will see it. But the fact that there is so much information has already made me dizzy, and I will throw it away. But if you simply put a well-elaborated image with 2-3 sentences, that is possibly enough to get my attention. More than anything, the way the information is presented is the most important, more digestible for the people who are going to receive it, people of all levels." Another quote from talking about convenience, this participant, female, age 57, she said, "I would say through churches, community centers, or even like in the schools, because a lot of grandparents are taking care of kids and reaching out to people like that. That's how I got my focus groups." Here she was talking about a focus group that she was part of, and she learned about it from the flyers at the elementary school of her granddaughter. And then a last quote that I have for you in relation to trusted source, the person that's gonna talk about this topic. This participant, female, age 63, she said, "I would very much like young people to learn about this in schools, and then from there with doctors in hospitals and universities, because that's where education comes from. They are our voice. Young people will learn it from schools, and then they're going to tell their parents, and their parents are going to learn. We sometimes don't pay attention to this stuff." So I think this one was a really good idea, start going maybe to our universities, maybe in the Psych 101 courses with our undergrads. We can go and maybe have a little section where we talk about brain donation in our neuropsychology courses. And then that way our students learn it, and then they go and tell their parents, and at least it becomes part of the conversation. And now for future research, I recently applied for a K award, and my plan for this K is to use what I learned from this pilot study and develop a survey, a questionnaire that will measure someone's willingness and intention to donate in the future. And as I mentioned earlier, willingness is still the best measure that we have for intention, the actual action to donate. And the plan is for, if I do get this K, is to ask for consent later on to these participants that maybe showed more willingness to donate in the future. And also the intention for this K01 is to develop material, educational material that will go specifically to participants that are already part of studies. For example, at UCSD, the ADRC have some information in Spanish and English for them. And also for Solinka, Dr. Gonzalez's study, we would also be reaching out to those participants. And but while I wait for this to happen, being that we have to wait for this KO1 to see if I get it funded or not, my plan is to start piloting a small survey using what I learned and gather from initial information from this pilot and from the literature that could help me develop this measure and see what I learned from it. Maybe from this, I would be better informed for the K when it's time to actually develop the survey. I'll probably know more about Latinos' intentions about donating. And but yeah, this study as a whole, I think it represents a key step to help inform research and develop specific tools in the context of Latinos cultures, attitudes, and beliefs that could potentially assist in the recruitment of autopsy studies. And yeah, with that, I want to thank the funding agency, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center for Minority Aging Research, and a special thanks to my colleagues in the Solinka lab, with a special thanks to Dr. Hector Gonzalez for his support, and my research assistant, Leslie Guareña, my qualitative expert, Cindy Schrader, and the support that I've been receiving since I started here at the ADRC. And yeah, with that, I want to say thank you for listening. And if you have any questions you don't want to ask them right now, feel free to email me or follow me on my academic Twitter, and I'll be more than happy to discuss more about this. Thank you. Oh, and my references just in case.